All right, greetings everybody. Happy Monday. Just hopping on here. I'm going to do something different today. Going to try to maybe start a new series here on Substack, do some live content on Monday morning. Apologize for my voice. Been dealing with a little bit of a head cold lately. Perks of having a 3-year-old son in school. So, what I want to try with this new series, I'm going to call it a series for now, is I spend a lot of time on social media, both sharing content and kind of browsing content. And I feel like every week on, we'll call it health, nutrition, fitness, Twitter or X, there's always content that is either worth commenting on, plainly ridiculous. I don't know, things that I have a lot of opinions on. So I've started to bookmark X posts that I think might be interesting for me to comment on or opine on. Some of them are takes that I just frankly disagree with. Some of these takes are just going to be interesting things that maybe sparked a lot of discussion on social media. Not necessarily those things that were posted by me, but things that maybe an influencer posted or somebody in the fitness space posted that seemed to generate a lot of discussion. So rather than come up with my own content, I decided to let the internet feed me content, and then I'll, read it back and provide my thoughts. So that's what we're going to do today. I think this should be fun. I think this should be interesting. I have 6 posts, I think, that I bookmarked from last week, and gonna show you them and share my thoughts. Thanks to this new cool feature on Substack Live, you can share your screen. So here is the first post that I thought was interesting. So this one was posted by Dr. Andrew Huberman. Most of you may be familiar with him, maybe not. He is a health podcaster, scientist, researcher, professor, goes by many names. So he posted, he said, one point of striving to get great sleep is so that the occasional night of bad sleep doesn't harm you. The whole point of eating clean is to feel great, but also so the occasional treat is no big deal. Anyone saying focusing on your health is a life of rigidity has it backwards. Okay, so I totally agree with this. And I think that this isn't necessarily, a comment that I disagreed with. So I think he's totally right. Why, the point of life is to live life. The point of so-called protocols, as he would kind of call them, is to, yes, have some structure in your life, but then also just be able to enjoy when your structure deviates from your normal structure. You want to be able to have the occasional night out where you're out till midnight and just be able to be fine the next day. Or you want to be able to have the occasional dessert or cheat meal, whatever we'll call it, without it just totally wrecking you. And I agree with that. But I actually commented below this post, and I think that it often tends to be the opposite in the health and the nutrition space. So, and I for one lump myself into here, being just as guilty of this. But we get locked up in these protocols and these habits. We go to bed early and we eat a diet that's pretty clean, and unfortunately, that often leads to, I think, more rigidity and not less. And maybe I'll call it fragility instead of rigidity. So if you're always going to bed at 8 p.m. and you are on this strict schedule, or you're always eating this diet that's very clean, maybe you're low carb or maybe you're keto. What I often see in the health and fitness space is that when people then deviate from said habit, it often just wrecks them for several days, either psychologically or physically. So I feel like we're kind of making ourselves more frail and fragile and not less, not more robust to these disturbances. So I get his sentiment here, but I think a lot of people in that case are missing the point. They're becoming very rigid in their habits, and it actually makes them weaker when they, go without sleep or aren't able to get their diet or their supplements. That's just kind of a personal observation. Obviously, I have no data to support that, but that's kind of what I'm seeing. And so while I agree that, yes, the point is to become more robust so that you can sort of enjoy life, we do protocols so that we can live life. We don't want our life to become the protocols, but often, unfortunately, I feel like that kind of becomes the case. So that's just kind of my opinion on that. And again, I've fallen into this trap myself where you're like, you're so used to going to bed at one single time, or you're so used to eating like the same thing every single day. And then when you're not able to do that, it's like, oh my gosh, you know, I stay up till midnight and the next day you're useless for like a couple days. Or I don't know. I think a good example here might be something like alcohol. If I respect anybody's choice to not drink or consume alcohol, obviously. Huberman is obviously definitely one of those like anti-alcohol people, for good reason. But if you want to enjoy the occasional beer or wine or a cocktail, I think that's great, and you want to live a life that kind of allows you to do that, like once or twice a week, as I do. But then if you're so rigid in that like one single drink leaves you incapacitated for a couple days, what is that? Are you actually building up resilience? Or are you just kind of becoming more fragile? So just kind of my opinion and my take on that one. All right. So here we go. Let's go to the next post. This one got a lot of traction here. So this one was posted by Hank. He's actually my good friend, Hank Henry McGreen, uh, very solid marathon runner, um, good guy. He posted this, and this kind of set the running, the running world afire, I guess I could say. It kind of went viral-ish. I mean, it has 105,000 views at the time of this. So what he posted was, not everyone is meant to BQ. And so for those unfamiliar, BQ means Boston qualify. So run a Boston qualifying time in the marathon. He says, not everyone is meant to BQ. I hate this take. Anyone with 2 working legs and 3 to 5 years of patience can qualify for Boston. The barrier isn't talent, it's consistency over a timeline most people aren't willing to commit to. I'm going to go ahead and turn my do not disturb on. Stop telling people what they can't do. Okay, so I posted, as you can maybe see under here, hard disagree. So I really, I don't want to dismiss the idea of hard work. I think if anybody puts their mind to a lot of things, they can accomplish it, and that goes for a Boston qualifier. But in reality, I just think that there are some people who are never going to run a quote unquote, what we'll call a fast marathon. Genetics come into play. I mean, there are just people who maybe physically are not just built to run a Boston qualifying time. Um, so I think that definitely comes into play. There's just a lot of genetic predisposition. And unfortunately, I think that in the running space, in the health and fitness space, that we're kind of so confined to, especially like on X and social media and these other platforms, we tend to look at everybody around us and be like, oh, everybody's like generally fit. And what we need to realize is that most of the people in this space with us are like in the top, 5% in terms of talent and health and fitness. I just think if you look at the average, the true average, on the bell curve, and then even below that, I mean, there are just a lot of people who they're never going to run that fast in a marathon. So I said hard disagree there, but I think that that's okay. One, not everybody wants to run a Boston qualifying time, and two, there are just individual differences in people, and some people just aren't going to do certain things. Some people are just not going to be an NBA, no matter how hard they try. Some people are never going to play PGA Tour golf. Some people are never going to be a CEO of a business. Some people are just meant to do some things and other people aren't. And, 3 to 5 years of hard work and patience might not necessarily get you there. So I like Hank's sentiment here. I mean, he's saying that, if you have 2 working legs and you put in 3 to 5 years of consistency, you can get yourself to a Boston qualifying time. I think he's drawing on a lot of anecdotes here, including his own. He mentions how he started running, um, and his first marathon was at 3:30, and then he eventually worked his way down. I think his personal best now is like a 3:39 in the marathon. So he worked his way towards that, and yeah, that's a powerful anecdotes are powerful, but I think sometimes we take these anecdotes and then apply them to, blanket. This everybody can do it. If I can do it, anybody can do it. I just don't necessarily think that's true. Maybe that's a pessimistic take on my part, but I just don't think that that's true. Not everybody is going to do that. But also, I texted him this offline, but I said the fact that you ran a 3 hour and 30-minute marathon for your first marathon goes to show that you are still an outlier, even though, you might not be an elite runner. If you run your first marathon and you run 3:30, you have some sort of genetic predisposition to like be a decent runner. So that's just my take there. There were a lot of people who disagreed, I feel like, with him more so than agreed, but it was kind of interesting to see the comments underneath his post there. All right. So let's see here. I did Huberman's, did Hank's. Okay. We're going to move on to the next one. Pardon my French on this one, but sometimes I see something so ridiculous that it just sets me off. I don't like to curse too much on social media, but it happens. Okay, so this one was kind of funny. Just I don't know if everybody's aware of sort of the history, not really a history, but between myself and Nassim Nicholas Taleb, famous author, economist, author of The Black Swan, among other notable books, which I've read, by the way, and thoroughly enjoyed. But he, several months ago, called me a retard on social media, which was fun. We were arguing over a exercise science study. But all that aside, he posted something on X where he posted this. He said, "Not so fast, creatinistas." Because there's obviously this huge popularity of creatine now on social media. Everybody's claiming it's good for everything, not just muscle strength, but brain health and function and longevity. And so there's kind of a lot of this hype around creatine, which I've spoken to before. It's a great supplement, but I think it's overrated. There's a lot going around where people are claiming it does all these things that it doesn't really do. Um, this guy posted something about how there was a single high dose of 20 grams of creatine improved cognitive function after sleep deprivation. Great study. I covered it. Very interesting study. And then he says, not so fast, creatine creatinistas. He posts this case study report that says, despite its generally favorable safety profile, emerging literature has raised concerns regarding potential vascular effects, particularly a possible association with thrombotic events. This is for creatine. This report presents a case of deep vein thrombosis temporally associated with creatine supplementation and provides an updated review of the evidence concerning this safety concern. So he was basically using this as like, oh, we shouldn't be so hyped up about creatine. There might be some negative effects of it. And he cited this case study to prove his point. So my comment on that was, holy shit. NNT, so Nassim Nicholas Taleb, warns that people should be careful with creatine and then cites what is perhaps the most flimsy case study ever as his evidence for potential vascular events. He's a physiology flaneur, but consistently demonstrates he's a pretty poor one at that. Flaneur, basically, that's one of his words. He uses it a lot in his books. A flaneur is sort of somebody who just ambles about society and comments on certain things. And Nassim Taleb he likes to do this in the space of like physiology and exercise science, despite being neither a physiologist nor an exercise scientist. He likes to cite all these studies about the risks of exercise, and he just really has no idea what he's talking about, to put it frankly. And so I went and read this case study that he cited, and basically it was this one guy who went to the hospital with deep vein thrombosis. Basically, that's just like a clot in your leg, like a blood clot in your leg. Um, and one of the things that they noted was that he had been supplementing with creatine. So there was nothing here about dose. There was nothing here about how often he had supplemented or when he started supplementing. It was just like in his doctor's report, he said, "Oh, I supplement with creatine." So I go into this case study and you start reading it, and it has all this information about the case study about this guy physically active man in his 20s, presented with a 3-day history of cramping and swelling in his right calf. His recent history included a 4-hour flight, and he otherwise reported being in his usual state of health. He is a current smoker, consumes alcohol occasionally, and denies the use of anabolic steroids or illicit substances. Notably, he reported regular use of over-the-counter creatine supplements for bodybuilding purposes. So, okay, the first line here is just like the dead giveaway. His recent history included a 4-hour flight. Do you know what like the number one risk factor for developing a deep vein thrombosis is? Long, like air travel flights. If you take a long flight and you're not moving, you're sitting in one place, that substantially increases your risk for experiencing one of these deep vein thrombotic events because there's no blood flow. You're up in a plane, poor oxygenation, you're not moving, you're not getting this blood flow, you're not getting the venous return from your legs. That literally could be the main cause of his deep vein thrombosis. Not to mention the guy is a smoker. He smokes cigarettes. Except this one little comment about that he takes creatine for bodybuilding purposes. We're going to go in there and say that this could potentially be the reason. So I don't know. The fact that this was even like published as a case study is crazy, honestly. But the fact then that Taleb even cited this, he likes to market himself as like this evidence-based, like statistically rigorous guy. And then he goes and cites this. I found it completely absurd that he did it. So again, just another example of like, I don't know. I hate to say this, but like stay in your lane sometimes. That's just my 2 cents there. All right, let's move on. I think I have 2 more here. Okay, this one was great. um, I think this was in reference to, let's see here. I'm kind of forgetting all the reference here. Oh, so there was all this, I would like to say drama, but Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War or whatever, bench pressed 315 pounds. And so the internet was like, oh, this is great. He's so strong. And then the other people are like, oh, 315 is not that impressive. So I posted something about, what's the mile time equivalent of a 315-pound bench press? And then Darren Lucas, again, just somebody I follow. He follows me. He posted underneath that, he said, plenty of college football players are 315 plus, meaning they can bench press 315 pounds, and sub 5, meaning sub 5 minutes in the mile. And I commented, or I quoted that and said, there's absolutely no way. Plenty of college football players can run a sub 5-minute mile. I think that there are probably maybe 1 or 2 college football players in the entirety of the NCAA who can probably run a mile in under 5 minutes. I would love to be proven wrong here. I would love to see, I'm sure there's not statistics here. I doubt that any of these college football teams are having their players run miles because it's not necessarily something a college football player needs to do for one, but it's just, that's just the nature of the sport that they do. It's anaerobic. It's 5 to 10 second bursts. They don't need to train to run a fast mile. So this isn't like a diss against like college football players, but they can't run under 5 minutes in the mile. College basketball players, I know that there are some who can do it. Notably, the Houston basketball team routinely actually does mile time trials. I think at the start of every season, they always post like a video of it. They have guys who are routinely running like 5 minutes to 5:15, maybe a couple guys under 5. But again, these are basketball players. These are not collegiate football players. So I don't know. I would like to put money on it that there are maybe like 5 college football players who could run sub 5 minutes in the mile, but I don't know. Again, I have nothing to support that, no base to support that, but I'd like to see it. Maybe some like a running back or like a wide receiver or something like that. And then maybe in the NFL, maybe that number would increase just because they're professionals. But I just found this frankly ridiculous. And most people on X actually agreed with me. They were like, "There's no way that you're going to find a college football player who can bench 315 and run a sub 5-minute mile." Delusional, as one of the guys underneath the comment says. All right. Last post on X here for this week. This is all I got. Okay, this one was from Nina Teichholz, PhD. So she is the author of a book called The Big Fat Surprise. Um, she's notably kind of in the keto, low carb crowd. Um, Mostly like keto, but this like animal based diet, like butter is back. You should be eating steak every day. Saturated fat is good. Yada yada yada. I can't find what I quoted this, but she said it's stunning that red meat is even considered to cause diabetes when it contains no glucose, sugar, or starch. And then in parentheses, diabetes is a disease of elevated blood glucose. Okay, Nina. So she is really just misunderstanding physiology here and the fact, or like what causes diabetes. So, okay, she is right in the fact that one of the physiological signs of diabetes is elevated blood glucose, but that elevated blood glucose is the result of insulin resistance. Diabetes is a disease of insulin resistance, not necessarily high blood glucose. You diagnose somebody with diabetes based on their blood glucose, but insulin resistance is the pathophysiology that leads to high blood glucose. So, where her logic is massively failing here is that she's saying red meat doesn't contain glucose, therefore, red meat cannot elevate your glucose, therefore, red meat can't cause diabetes. Okay, so you can theoretically, it doesn't happen often, but one could develop type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance, not through eating a ton of sugar or starches, because there are a lot of things that cause insulin resistance, notably just being overweight. And you could get overweight, again, in theory, say on a carnivore diet or on a ketogenic diet. And if you have elevated levels of fat, adipose tissue, you can develop insulin resistance. So you could develop insulin resistance just by eating meat, which contains no sugar or starch. Um, Again, it doesn't happen often. Okay. We see people, you're just eating a highly processed diet, high carbs, high fat, high protein, just high everything, too much food, gaining weight, gaining fat. You're going to become insulin resistant. So, more commonly, yes, you're going to be eating a lot of starch and sugar. That's going to kind of lead to this insulin resistance and then diabetes. But again, her logic here is not making a lot of sense. Because glucose or starch is neither necessary nor sufficient to cause insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes. In fact, a high saturated fat meal or a high saturated fat diet could also lead to insulin resistance. They show that in animal models and things like that. But again, she's just and she's quoting something from the New York Post, which not the most rigorous like health journalism. So I'm not gonna say that like the New York Post. I didn't even read this article that says chicken might not be healthier than beef. New study suggests, but I don't know. She's always posting things that sort of support her agenda of eat more meat, eat more butter, eat more fat. And this post, though, by her was just frankly like incorrect. The logic here was kind of crazy. So I quoted something like, again, saying neither necessary sugar or starch, neither necessary nor sufficient to cause type 2 diabetes. Um, so the fact that she said this and claims to just be like this expert and is just saying things that don't really make any sense at all. Okay, so that's it. I was collecting some posts. Um, Hopefully those were kind of interesting. I have a lot more, but I'm going to continue to bookmark this stuff. I just think there's a lot of interesting stuff on social media, and I try not to be a hater, as I'll call it. I'm not on social media to dunk on people. I'm not on social media to really argue. I've these days decided I'm just like I mute a lot of conversations on X because I'm just like I'm not here to argue or I don't have time, to spend arguing back and forth on social media. But it is fun every once in a while just to see, you know, either misinformation just being spread or people just saying kind of like silly things and then commenting on it. So this is kind of just meant to be fun, but hopefully like insightful. I feel like with some of these topics, like whether they're related to running or nutrition, like maybe have some interesting insights. But I'm gonna try to do this more often because there's unlimited content that is on social media that can be harvested and repurposed for scenarios like today. And Also, I've been trying to do a little more Substack Live, interact with you guys on video and whatnot. So hopefully this was fun. Just wanted to hop on here and do that today. If you liked it, give the video a like and tell me what you'd like to see more of. If you'd like to see more content posting about ridiculous stuff on X. But thanks to everybody who joined, all 47 of you on this Monday morning. And I guess that is all for now. So I'll talk to you all later.